Very good morning, friends. So I think we're almost on the close of the year and going on to the next year, that is 2026. I hope it brings good energy levels and success for all of you. So I think we should always keep putting in our continuous good efforts, and I think let's leave the results to God. So I think on that note, let's begin the journey. I hope you made a revision of what we did in the last session. We started our inputs in terms of the scope of the standard, and we were talking in terms of control assessment. I divided the entire journey in terms of consolidation in three blocks, or you can say three sections. The first section I said is going to focus in terms of the scope of the standard and on the control assessment. The second one is going to be the consolidation, how you would do the consolidation. And then we're going to look at the other aspects, which is the case of a loss of control. If you acquire more shares, or let's say, for example, if you sell shares, in those particular cases, there could be changes in ownership interest. Maybe it could result in a loss of control, or maybe not a loss of control. So let's come back to the inputs, what we discussed. That was the section one, the block one, that is the scope as well as the concept of control assessment. So I think as usual, I always give you a quick summary mind map in terms of what we did in the previous session. So we're just going to take a quick recap on the scope, and we are still discussing the concept of control assessment. Today, we'll get a very fair idea on how the control assessment is done. And we're also going to get a fair idea of how the consolidation is done, not at a very advanced level. We'll go slowly and steadily into the advanced levels as well. So I think first, let me make a quick mind map to you. So the first section with which we started our input in terms of Index 110 is with regard to the scope of the standard. Now, since we already know the nitty-gritties at this stage, I think I'll just quickly create a small little mind map. So I would say when you're looking at whether consolidation is mandatory or it is optional, so we can say we can look at a case study in two manners. We're looking at a particular case study in two manners. One is we can see that there is no chain holding. One is we can see that there is no chain holding, and the other one we can see that there is a chain holding. That's your very first attack when you're looking at a scope of the standard, that there is no chain holding or there is a chain holding. Now, what should come to the mind is that when there is no chain holding, in that particular case, the para number 4A, small a, I'm talking of, is not applicable, because that applies only in terms of a chain to the middle company. So in this case, when there is no chain holding, one thing which should come to the mind is that para number 4, and that is clause A, is not applicable. So this is one thought which should come to the mind. And second is, so we need to consider that as far as para number 4B is concerned, this may be applicable. I'm not saying will always be applicable. This may be applicable because it's applicable only towards an investment entity. Okay, so I guess in this particular case, we can say, why I'm saying it's maybe applicable only if the parent, is an investment entity. I'm putting it as IE, you'll get the picture that it is an investment entity. So if it is not an investment entity, then even the para number 4B would not apply. And to remind you, I segregated the concept of para number 3B into a simple three-step model. So we divided and segregated this in terms of a three-step model just to quickly give you the inputs. So we need to see, first of all, whether the parent company is an investment entity or not. Then we need to see that the subsidiary company, is it an investment entity or not? And then we need to see that the services which are provided by the subsidiary company is supposed to be similar to the parent company or not. So three focus points. in terms of the three-step model, the parent is an investment entity, the subsidiary is an investment entity, and if these services are similar or not. So these are the three focus points. Rest, you know the inputs very clear. So this is when there is no chain holding, the para 4A is never applicable, and the para 4B, as I said, may be applicable. That also depends whether the parent is an investment entity or not. Then comes the concept of a chain holding. Now, when we come to the concept of a chain holding, we decided in this particular case that we can look into, first of all, the parent company. So we're looking at the parent company, and I would call it as a middle company. So let's put it like this, that parent company in the sense, so we can say this is the ultimate parent. I'm looking at the ultimate parent. So in this particular case, you'll see that we're looking at the top company, that is the ultimate parent, or we're looking at the middle parent, which is in the chain. Now, in this case, if you're looking at a parent company, again, in this particular case, the concept of para number 4A is not applicable. So even if it is a chain holding, the concept of para 4A is not applicable, but 4B may be applicable, depending whether the parent company, the top parent company, is supposed to be an investment entity or not. So same considerations would follow. Now, if you look at the concept of a middle company, then you need to be certain that in this case, we can say either the para number 4A would apply. So either the para number 4A would apply, because in this case to the middle company, the para 4A could also apply, depending upon the four conditions which we did. So in this particular case, we can just say that para 4A is about those four conditions. And the four conditions: you are a wholly owned subsidiary or you're a partly owned subsidiary with an NOC, you're not a listed company, you're not in the process of listing, and the ultimate parent is preparing financial statements, consolidated financial statements for public use. That is one. And as per Ind AS number 2. I'm not documenting those four conditions. So either para number 4A would apply, or we can say the para 4B could apply, or the para 4B could apply. So when I'm saying could apply, again, if it is supposed to be an investment entity. So this is again going to connect to the same thing only if the parent company is an investment company. But then we also decided something important, that based on the analysis of both these paras, we decided what will prevail. So we decided in terms of what will prevail, whatever para number 4B tells me, that is going to prevail. Because we decided that para number 4A is supposed to be something which gives you a choice, and para number 4B is something which mandates. So I think just to connect the dots, the para number 4A is something which gives you a choice, and the para number 4B is something which is mandatory, which tells you that you cannot consolidate. So I think that was a quick inputs in terms of all the things we discussed on the scope of the standard. So attacking chain, the attacking thought process is not a chain holding, then the focus is 4B only. 4A cannot trigger in that case. And for that, investment entity is something which is mandated. If it is a chain holding, it depends whose perception you're looking at. Are you looking at the perception of the parent company? Then para number 4B. If you're looking at the perception of the middle company, the 4A or the 4B could apply, but 4B will prevail on the concept of para number 4A. I hope, friends, that helps, that consolidates the input. Okay, that's great indeed. I think that is done. Okay, I get a lot of questions coming in as well. Good morning, sir. 4 issues. The PDF of the lecture dated 23rd December is corrupted on the ICAI app. I made a file using screenshots of the lecture. Can I share it with you for the benefit of all? Yes, you can definitely do that. I think, reload it once again for the benefit of all. That's a great job done. I have made an Excel file to understand the impairment of goodwill net assets in case of business combination. As per the example given by you on 20th December, can I share that too for the benefit of other students? Okay, you can, but I think I may not load that on the app actually, because we're supposed to only load, things which are written by me. So I'm not sure whether we can upload that or not, but that's, I think, good job done. The app doesn't show more lectures on consolidated financial statements in the schedule. Hope there would be more lectures happening. Yes, of course. We are scheduled to have more lectures, undoubtedly. We've just started a journey on consolidation. So in any case, the lectures are there. I think the date is 13th Jan. I think we're having lectures till that date. I was referring to your last year videos for this topic. Can you please share the PDFs of those lectures if possible? I don't think so. I may be having inputs on those PDFs now. It's been quite some time. So, I load it on my board and then it's saved. So I think I keep cleaning that as well. I'm sorry, I may not have that. Yes, Prashant. Thank you. You're the best. Thank you very much. Yes, I think.
Thank you, sir. So just one suggestion, one request. So at the end, although you already make mind maps and everything, but at the end of the consolidation, if we can make a map of all the adjustments, possible adjustments, and at your end, if
I'll
possible.
do that. In fact, I create a 7-step model. This is well taken. I would definitely, consolidate all the 7 steps to you, give you all the thought processes which are required in each and every step in the end. Definitely well taken. I'll definitely do that.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Right, friends. So this was one input. Now let's go to the next input with you. Then we started a journey on the concept of a control assessment. I think this is what we are discussing at this stage. 3-step model. We've discussed some aspects of the 3-step model already. Now we need to discuss some other aspects as well. So in terms of the 3-step model, for the concept of a control assessment, I divided the journey in terms of step number 1, that is ABC. So the first is that we need to see as an investor, do you exercise power over the investee? And power has got 3 elements. Power has got a total of 3 elements. And we said one is existing rights. We're yet to discuss this part. That what are the existing rights? That is yet to be discussed. The second is the concept of current ability. The second is the concept of current ability, which we have already covered. And the third is, we can say, relevant activities. We should be in a position to direct the relevant activities of the business. So in terms of the power assessment, we have already made our discussions with reference to the relevant activities. I gave you an example, a list of examples which are relevant activities. But at the same time, I also reminded you that relevant activities are those which will significantly impact the profits of the investee. As an investor, I am in a position to direct relevant activities of the investee, which could, impact the profitability. We gave you examples: purchase and sale of assets, managing financial assets, etc. Then we also looked into the current ability and we said when need arises. It is not supposed to be as of today. It is not supposed to be as of today, but we said when the need arises. And if you remember, I gave you 3 permutation combinations in terms of the current ability. We decided one is a case of a forward contract. We decided one is a case of an option contract. So one is a case of forward contract, and one is you already have majority voting rights. Now, if you've got majority voting rights, I would say you have the power. If you've got a forward contract, what is important is the settlement of the contract before the meeting date. And if you've got an option contract, then there are 2 elements important. Number 1, it should be deeply in money. And number 2, it should be settled before the date of meeting. So in terms of forward contract, only one condition. Only one condition, that the contract will be settled before the date of the meeting. And if it is supposed to be option, there are two conditions. One is it's deeply in money, and the second is it's going to be settled before the date of meeting. And if you've got majority voting rights, we always say, yes, you've got the current ability. So these two factors discussed, we are yet to discuss the concept of existing rights. Then the second step in this case was that you are exposed as an investor, you are exposed to variable returns. We're here to discuss this aspect as well, that when we say that you're exposed to variability of returns, we'll understand this also very shortly. And then we said there has got to be a linkage. There has got to be a linkage between, you can say, the power as well as the return, the step number one and the step number two. Now, if you say yes, there is a power, and if you say yes, we are exposed to variable return, automatically it implies that yes, there is a linkage in terms of power as well as return. So this is what we covered so far. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in deep on step 1A. So we're going to work upon the concept of existing rights. Then I'm going to come to the exposure to variable returns, and third is automatically implied. Now, what we are trying to learn is a control assessment which is subjective, which is principle based. So you need to look at the facts of the case very carefully, and trust me, if you alter those facts, the decisions could turn out to be different. So because there is a level of judgment, there is a level of subjectivity. So the moment you change the facts of the case, you will see that the answer could change. So as we're going to look at those examples to understand the control assessment, trust me, I'm going to give you some kind of parameters to decide things. But subjectivity still remains. It's not that I can tell you 2 plus 2 is 4. It could be, sometimes subjective indeed. But most of the illustrations which are given in the standard do not contain that element of subjectivity. The facts of the case are such that, no two individuals could reach a different answer. So at least for the examples which we're going to cover, you will not see any level of subjectivity. But that does not mean that there is no subjectivity on the control assessment. Control assessment, as I said, is principle-based assessment. Subjectivity would definitely follow. On that note, I think let's begin the journey. So I'm now coming to the concept of existing rights. So basically, I'm on step number 1A. And that is on the concept of existing rights. That is on the concept of existing rights. Now, please hear me carefully. When you read the standard, the concept of existing rights can be divided into two broad parameters. The standard defines generally, I'm saying generally, the existing rights would be in the nature of voting rights. So when I look at the existing rights, we can say there are two kinds of rights. One is what we call is voting rights. So one is called voting rights, which generally comes when you've got equity shares in the investee company. And because of equity shares, you get a voting power, and therefore a control can take place. The other one is what we call right to appoint. The other one is called the right to appoint or remove. The right to appoint or remove the key management personnel of the investee, KMP. Now, let me, I think, first tell you one thing very clear. It is difficult to prove the concept of control only on the basis of a right to appoint or remove the KMP. Well, this is not written in the standard. So let me caution you that this is a view, which is generally followed on a practical levels as well. It is difficult if you say that you've got, let's say, a 10% or a 15% voting power, and you say that I have the right to appoint and remove the KMP of the investee. It is difficult to prove the control in that case. And, in this case, the consolidation will also look very weird. Let's say, for example, as an investor, you've got very less voting power, but you've got the right to appoint and remove the KMP. So if you've got, let's say, a 15% stake, then you're saying 85% is with NCI. Now that becomes a very, a very, very odd kind of a consolidation where you consolidate a balance sheet saying that I have a 15% stake, 85% belongs to other. So that would be a rare combination to see. So conceptually, yes, I would say the control can be achieved even with the right to appoint or remove KMP. But having said that, looking at the practicality of the situations, it is difficult that without a substantial voting rights and only a voting rights to appoint, remove KMP, control may generally not be established. That is one. So I'm putting this as and or. Though I'm putting it as and or, it could be a combination of the two, or it could be independent of the two as well. Now, let's come to the concept of the first one. When you say that you've got voting rights in the investee, there will be two situations. So when you see the voting rights, I would say there will be two situations. Number one, as an investor, you have got majority voting rights. As an investor, you've got majority voting rights, or as an investor, you've got less than. You've got less than majority voting rights. So these are the two permutations and combinations. You've got majority more than 50, or you've got less than majority, that is less than 50. Now, if you've got more than majority voting rights, unless there is anything to the contrary, I would say the power is implied. I didn't say control, because control has got more parameters as well. So if you say majority voting rights, I would say, again, there could be two situations. So I would say generally. I would say generally. In this case, generally, we can say power is implied. In this particular case, I would say the power is implied. So if you've got majority voting rights in a company, it goes without saying that generally you have the power. I always tell people like this, jiski lathi uski bhains. So if you've got majority voting rights, I think it goes without saying that you are supposed to be a majority shareholder, so power is implied. But then there can be an exception. Then there can be an exception where there is no power. Then there can be an exception when you say that there is no power. And let's see what is the exception. Let's say as an investor, I've got majority voting rights, but if I want to exercise those rights, it is subject to approval. It is subject to approval of regulatory authorities. So exercising this substantial voting right, let us say it is subject to approval. I need to take approvals before I can exercise those voting rights. Now, that would be a little exceptional kind of circumstances. Let's say, for example, the company is, in the process of getting liquidation, it is getting into insolvency. So even as a majority voting right, even as an investor with a majority voting rights, my exercise of those voting right needs an approval. It is subject to the approval of the regulatory authorities. In that case, you cannot get power. The thumb rule is that if you've got majority voting rights, you've got power. But if it is subject to taking permissions, it is subject to taking approval, then you don't get a power. Now, there is not much judgment to be applied in these two cases. Because when you say that you've got majority voting rights, by default, you've got power. And if it is subject to approval, then we say you do not have power. The subjectivity, the judgment comes in this case. When you say that you've got less than majority voting rights, I think let me expand this a bit more. So let me expand this a bit more. When you say less than majority voting rights. Now, as an investor, if you've got less than majority voting rights, there has to be something more. There has to be something more which you've got in order to prove that you get power. So in this case, we can say there could be a lot of permutations, combinations. So I would say in this particular case, there is something else along with it. There is something else along with this as well. So as an investor, if you've got less than majority voting rights, I will say, okay, let me see what else you've got with the investee. Now, what else is, there could be a case, for example, what we call contractual arrangement. There is something what we call a contractual arrangement with other investors. So there could be a contractual arrangement, what we can say, with other investors. Let me, I think, explain that bit. Let's say, for example, as an investor, I've got, let's say, a 40% stake in a company. So I've got less than majority voting rights because I've got a 40% stake in that company. But let's say there is another investor who has got a 20% stake. So we enter into a contractual agreement with each other that we're always going to act on a joint manner. We will always act together. So my percentage 40 and the other investor's percentage 20 makes it a total of 60. So you need to see that even if you're less than majority investor, did you enter into any kind of contractual agreements with other investors? So in this particular case, when you enter into the arrangement with other investors, maybe your percentage along with the percentage of the other investor gives you more than 50% voting power. Let me, I think, now ask you, if as an investor, I've got less than majority, and there is another investor who enters into a contract with me, is it confirmed case of power or is this going to be still judgmental? Think about this. And that's rightly said. So I would say in this particular case, it would be a confirmed case of power. Because your percentage with the percentage of the other investors will definitely give you an input, that yes, you are able to exert the power. This is a case where I think subjectivity would not fall because you just need to add your own percentage with the percentage of the other investor to reach a conclusion. Great. Next. The second combination is apart from the majority voting rights. Let us say along with this, what is something else is, let's say I have got some potential voting rights. I have got, let's say, some potential voting rights. So that means I have equity shares in the other company investee, less than majority, but I also hold certain securities like convertible debentures, like for example, convertible preference shares, which may, mind the words, which may convert into ordinary share. So today, let's say I've got a 45% stake in the investee, but with the potential voting rights getting converted to ordinary shares, your percentage may change more than 50. But the main question is that whether these potential voting rights will definitely be exercised or not. I don't think so. That we can say that yes, if you've got convertible debentures, you'll definitely convert them into ordinary share. So is the element of evaluation required? Are you required to make an evaluation that if you've got potential voting rights, then I may or may not exercise those rights? And if you exercise, you may get a power. And if you don't exercise, you may not get a power. So my question is that if you've got potential voting rights, will that be a confirmed case of power? Or do you think this would be subjective and an assessment would be required? And that's rightly said, it is not a confirmed case of power. I would say this will require judgment. Because whether you will exercise those potential voting rights or not is something which is, subjective in nature. So you need to look into the facts of the case carefully, what kind of other combinations you've got. You are a vote holder, less than majority, but something else. That combination gives you the power or not. Next, number 3. The third is that we've also got the right to appoint. You've also got the right to appoint or remove KMP. So as I said earlier, and or, so this is what we can say, that you've got less than majority voting rights. But along with this, you've also got the right to appoint or remove the KMP. The people who will sit in the board, the people who will take the decisions regarding the company, so you control who is going to sit on that seat. You are the deciding factor that who is going to sit on the board of directors, who is going to take all the decisions on relevant activity. But let me again ask you, is this again going to be a conclusive case of power? Or do you think this is again going to be subjective indeed? Simply because you get the right to appoint or remove the KMP, do you think it'll be a confirmed case that you get a power? Or again, the facts of the case need to be assessed and you will have to evaluate whether there is a power or not. And that's right. In this case, again, it is going to be something which is assessment based and it is going to require judgment again. Great. Let's come to the next one. Then the standard says that you've got nothing else. The standard says that you're the less than majority voting rights, but you've got nothing else. But you've got nothing else but in this particular case. You are the only investor with a substantial percentage. You are the only investor with a substantial percentage. Everybody is too small in front of you. I always tell people on a lighter mood that this is what I call Andho mein Kana Raja. That you're telling the other people that you are too small in front of me. As an investor, I have got the substantial percentage. It is below 50, but still, it is below 50, but still I am the only investor with a huge percentage. Everybody has got a very minor kind of percentage. So which means that if I am the investor, the only largest investor in the company, rest is too small in front of me. But do you think this will also confirm power? Or do you think it also depends upon how active the other investors are? They may be smaller investors, but when decisions are taken, everybody comes to the meeting and they take, active participation in the decision making. So do you think this is confirmed case, or do you think this is again going to be subjective? That's right. So I would say this will also require judgment in this particular case, because this is again subjective indeed. And finally, the standard says that there could be a mix of combinations. There could be a mix of combinations as well. That means all the factors are put together. You've got some contractual arrangement, you've got some potential voting rights, etc. A combinations of all these permutations combination. So let me, I think, first connect the dots further before we go ahead. Let me just connect the dots once again. So I am working on the concept of what we call existing rights. The step number 1A. As an investor, there are two kinds of rights which can be there: voting rights, and the other one is the right to appoint or remove the KMP. As I said, this right on a standalone basis generally cannot give you power. It is difficult. Without getting some voting rights and only the right to appoint, remove KMP, you cannot generally say that you get a power. Now, when you say voting rights, I would say there are two main combinations, or we can say three combinations. Generally, if you've got majority voting rights, unless mentioned anything to the contrary, you get power. Second, you've got majority voting rights, but it is subject to taking approvals from the regulatory authorities. Generally, you will not get power. And the third is the subjective case where you got less than majority voting rights. In this case, when you've got less than majority voting rights, you need to see that apart from those less than majority voting rights, something else is there with you. Either you have entered into contractual arrangement with other investors to act jointly. In those cases, you and the other investors put together gets more than 50, and therefore it will be a confirmed case of power. Or you have some potential voting rights, convertible debentures, etc., but which you may or may not exercise. So an assessment would be required to decide whether you're going to exercise those potential voting rights or not. So we'll have to see the facts and decide. The third is you get the right to appoint or remove the KMP. That is again subjective, because you cannot say that it's a confirmed case of power, so you'll have to evaluate the facts of the case. The fourth is you've got nothing else except the less than majority voting rights, but you are a single largest investor. Everybody is small in front of you. But that doesn't mean that every other investor is small, so they do not get a power. It all depends upon their active participation as an investor in the company's meeting. We need to see that, is other shareholders sitting quietly, or they do also actively participate in this. Or it could be a mix of all the permutations, combinations. So all this is going to be subjective, except this case, which is a confirmed case of power. I hope, friends, I have given you a thought process in terms of deciding the power concept. You got the chain correct, existing rights, relevant activities we know, current ability we know. So now we're just going to concentrate on power. We're just going to concentrate on power. So I hope the chain of thought is very clear in the mind. Okay, so let's, I think, begin with this and let's go further. Okay, I think maybe you can share it out here. Abhishek, I think you sent a message. You can maybe share it out here. I will download that. Okay, so let's, I think, now go to the case studies with you. So I'm going to take you, first of all, on some examples which are given in the appendix to the standard. These are also given in the study material as well. They are given in the appendix A. It is the application examples. I hope that is clearly visible to you. So I think, first of all, look at the inputs. Now, as I'm going to read the facts of the case, you need to tell me in which bucket am I falling. Is it majority? It is less than majority? And what kind of combination is working on them? It says an investor acquires 48% voting rights. Undoubtedly, it is a case where it is less than majority. So we can say it is a case which is less than majority. Now we need to see, is there something else which is held or not? The remaining voting rights are held by thousands of shareholders, none of which individually has got more than 1% voting rights. None of the shareholders has any arrangement to consult any others or make a collective decision. Would you like to tell me which case is this? As an investor, I've got a 48% stake. I have no other contractual arrangement, no other facts given. Everybody else is 1% investor. And that's rightly said. So that's wonderful. So we can say this is a case where it is less than majority and there is nothing else which is held. So we've already seen that this is going to be subjective indeed. This is going to be subjective. We'll have to look at the facts of the case and then decide. Now, in this particular case, it says, when assessing the proportion voting rights on the basis of relative size of the other shareholding, the investor determined that 48% interest would be sufficient to give it control. In this case, on the basis of absolute size of the holding and the relative size of the other investors, the investors conclude that it has got a sufficient dominant voting rights to meet the power criteria without the need to consider any other evidence. Though I am not given any other facts in the question, but they made it very clear 48% your absolute size. And when you compare it relative to others, so which means in this case, I can conclude what we are looking at is two fundamental parameters. What is the absolute size of the given investor? And what is the relative size of the other investors? So we're looking at the absolute size of the given investor, that is one. And we're looking at the relative size as compared to the other investors. There is nothing which is given to the contrary, though it is subjective, but I think the guidance which is given in the standard is when you look at your absolute size, 48% big, when you compare it with other, all people, thousands of shareholders, and it says all those 1,000 shareholders, nobody's got one more than 1%. I am the biggest investor in the company. Everybody is too relatively small as compared to me. And therefore, no other evidence required and the power exists. Okay, let's go to the next one. It says in example number 5, A has got a 40% of the voting rights, and there are 12 other investors with 5% of the voting rights. So A has got a 40%, and there are 12 investors with 5% each, makes it 60. So 40 plus 60 makes it 100. And then it says a shareholder agreement grants the investor A the right to appoint or remove and set the remuneration of management responsible for directing the relevant activities. So would you like to tell me which case is this? Undoubtedly, it is less than majority voting rights. And what is that something else which we have got in this particular case? So I have got 40% less than majority, but I also have the right to appoint and remove the KMP, those people who will direct the relevant activities of the business. Wonderful indeed. So the combination is that you've got the right to appoint and remove KMP. You've got the right to appoint as well as remove the KMP of the company. And I think as we decided earlier, this is again something which is subjective in nature. It is not something which we can clearly say that will give you power. Now, let's read the facts further. And let's see, are the facts of the case going to give us a decision or not? Let's read. It says to change the agreement, it says a two-third. A two-third would mean 66.67%. It says to change the agreement, two-third majority votes of the shareholder is required. Now let me ask you something. I have got a 40% stake in the company and all other 12 investors have got a 5%, collectively put together 60%. If they want to remove me from the position of appointing or removing KMP, do you think they can remove me from that power? And that's right, no. Because they need at least a two-third majority, a 66.67%, and they've got put together 60%. They're not in a position to remove me. Which means who is going to sit on that chair to take the decisions will be decided by me as an investor. Which means now I would say that I get a power. So in this particular case, the parameters, what we're evaluating is the right to appoint or remove KMP. The right to appoint or remove KMP cannot be taken over. We can say cannot be snatched away. I'm putting it a little local language. It cannot be snatched away because this percentage cannot be achieved. Others have got 60%. They cannot remove this right. If they cannot remove this right, I will always be in a position to decide who is going to sit in the chair. Now, trust me, if you say that you need more than 50% to decide who can remove, then it becomes subjective. then the facts of the case would change. It is only because of the facts of the case that nobody can remove me. I think it's a confirmed case where I can say, yes, we get power. Right. So we can see facts of the case are given in such a manner that subjectivity automatically is getting diluted. Let's go further. Let me crop this. So we've got another example. So let me just, I think, also read a few inputs which are given out here. So it says, investor A determines that it is a contractual right to appoint and remove and set the remuneration is sufficient to conclude that it has got power over the investee. Then he also adds the fact that investor A might not have exercised this right, or the likelihood of the investor exercising the right shall not be considered when assessing whether he has got power. I may not have exercised this right earlier. I may not be, planning to exercise this right as well. But I guess since you are in a position to take decisions, your historical experiences, whether you actually, exercise this right or not, or you're planning to exercise or not, will not make a difference. To the extent that you are in a position to dictate, that's important. Whether you dictate it in the past or not, whether you're planning to dictate it in the future or not, cannot be taken into account for the assessment. That's wonderful. Let's look at another example. Example number 6. It says A has got a 45% of the voting rights, and there are two other investors who have got 26% each. We've got 26% each, and the remaining rights are held by three other investors. Each has got 1%. Each has got 1%. Now, one thing is very clear, that if you've got 45%, you've got less than majority voting rights. Now, is there anything else? Tell me, which case is this? Is there anything else which is given in the case? No contractual arrangements, no other data given. So is there anything else? I have got 45% stake, so we can say there is nothing else. And if there is nothing else, we can definitely say it is again subjective. It is supposed to be assessment based. Now, let me put a small little question to you. Do you think those two people who've got 26% each, if they join hands, can they easily outvote me? I have got a stake in the company, which is to the extent of 45%, but those two people with 26% stake makes it 52. So even if they don't like each other's face, I'm just putting it, a little dramatic manner. Let's say even if those two people who've got a 26% stake don't like each other's face, do you think they'll still join hands? Say yes or no. And that's right. Because they know that we don't want to be dictated by this 45% people. So what they will do, they might join hands. I'm getting something in the back of the mind. I always tell people in this case, दुश्मन का दुश्मन दोस्त होता है. So in this particular case, you can see that those two people with 26% stake can join hands easily to outvote me as an investor. Now you would say, sir, even in the previous example, when there were 12 investors with 5% each, they could have joined hands. No. The standard also very clearly states, more the people required to outvote me as an investor, the possibility is less. You cannot expect 12 investors to join hands together, but you can definitely expect two people joining hands. Two people with 26% may easily join hands, but 12 people with 5% each is difficult. Lesser the people required to outvote me, I will lose power. So I think the analysis which comes out of this input is only two investors. That is the key essence. Only two investors are required to outvote So only two investors are required to outvote investor A. So they will easily join hands because only two people need to join in hands to remove me. So in this particular case, the possibility is great that two investors can easily join hands and remove me. So therefore, A cannot get a power in this case.
So I think so. In that example, two-thirds were required. So
No,
they
no, I'm
could
not
not have.
talking of that example. No, no, no. I'm not
Okay.
talking of that example. I'm
Okay,
talking of
sir. Okay.
example number four. In terms of example number 448, okay. In this case, yes. If you're looking at example number five, yes, I'm talking of that as well. But let's say the right to appoint the removed KMP was not there. Then I think in this case, the power cannot come. It is only because along with that less than 50%, you also get the right to appoint. So let's remove that right to appoint. Then I can say 12 investors may not be in a position, but nevertheless, it still remains subjective. Because even if you're able to prove that those 12 investors cannot join in hands, then it'll be subjective. So the element of right to appoint remove KMP definitely, I would say, adds the fact that power is there. Correct. I agree. Okay, so it says out here only two other investors would be needed to cooperate to be able to prevent investor A from directing the relevant activities. So therefore, I think investor A in this case cannot get power. So you would have realized one thing that the three examples which we did, I think the first one is definitely subjective because there are no other facts which are given. So when you say that you're a single largest investor and everybody is, relatively small, the subjectivity is still there. But in the absence of anything to the contrary, we said we get a power. The second one, where your right to appoint remove KMP cannot be taken away, I think that adds this. The third case, in this particular case, that when you say that, in this particular case, when you say that two people can easily outvote you, I think the level of subjectivity gets diluted and it is easily proven that you do not get power. So I think the facts in the example number four is subjective. The facts in example number five and six gets little subjective because of that additional data. I think you'll agree with me, correct? Let's go further. So let's, I think, add another one or two more examples. Example 7 and example number 8. So let's have a look at the example number 7. And then we'll see example number 8. And then we've got more examples also coming in on the potential voting rights as well. It says investor has got a 45% voting rights. And there are 11 other shareholders. Each has got 5% voting rights. That's it. None of the shareholders has got any contractual arrangements. So I think it is definitely less than majority. It is definitely less than majority. And what else is there? Is there anything else or nothing? I've just got a 45% stake in the company and rest there 11 people with a 5% stake. And that's right. So there is nothing else. Let me, I think, ask you something at this stage. Undoubtedly, it is subjective in nature. Is this similar to example number 5 without the element of right to appoint remove KMP? Is that correct? And that's rightly agreed, quick and fast. So we can say in example 5, the same situation was there, but there was a right to appoint. So this is an example 5 without the right to appoint remove KMP. So I think I like to put it across. So I would say this example is same as example 5, but in this case, it is without. In this case, it is without the right to appoint remove KMP. It is without the right to appoint, or you can say the remove KMP. So can I say in this particular case, it is something similar to example number 6? Example number 6, only 2 people required to outvote, but here you need a total of 11 people to outvote. So can I say in example 6, they can easily outvote, but in this case, they cannot easily outvote. Is my thought correct? That's right. So we can say in this case, the absolute size of the investor and the relative size of the other shareholdings are not conclusive in determining whether the investor has got power. Additional facts and circumstances may provide evidence that investor does or does not have power. So in this particular case, when you look at those 11 shareholders who've got 5% each, it is difficult to say that they will get together or not. They may get together, they may not get together. So I think in the absence of any other inputs, it is completely subjective. So this example is giving the facts which is indicating it's completely subjective in nature. Okay, let's go to the next example now. It says in example number 8, investor has got a 35% voting rights. And there are 3 other investors with 5% voting rights. The remaining is held by numerous other shareholders, none of which individually has got more than 1%. And none of the shareholders have any kind of arrangement as well. So looking at the facts as so far, is it completely subjective? This is again a case where it is less than majority. And there is nothing else which is held in this particular case. So can I say at this particular case, looking at the facts so far, it is completely subjective. You cannot say that this investor gets a power and you cannot say that the other investors will get a power. Completely subjective. You got a 35% stake, 3 investors with 5% each makes it 15. And then everybody is relatively quite smaller as compared to your size. But then he says, decisions on relevant activities require the approval of majority votes, 75% of the voting rights. He says, if you want to achieve a decision, you need to have 75% voting rights. And if I tell you that everybody actively participates in the meeting, the historical experiences tell me that there is a complete active participation in the shareholders meeting. Do you think I can prove that he has got power, or it remains completely subjective in this case? Or do you think that I cannot prove that he's got a power? Because with 35, whatever permutation combinations he try, do you think he can reach a 75% stake? Or should I say, no, I don't think so. You can reach a 75% stake. And therefore, the percentage of 75% is too high to achieve. And therefore, I cannot say that a power would arise for the investor. That's right. So in this case, the active participation of the shareholders at the recent meetings indicates investor would not have the practical ability to direct the relevant activities in this case. So I would say there is no power. So you can see a little level of subjectivities in cases here and there. Some of the cases are very simple and straight, where the facts of the case is clearly indicating, yes, you've got a power. And some of the cases a little subjective indeed. Okay, so this is example 8. Let's look at another example. This is example number 9. And I think there are 10 examples which are given in the standard. Yes, we've got a total of 10 examples in this case. So now both the examples are concentrating on the concept of potential voting rights. So let's have a look at example number 9 first. And this is all indicating the potential voting rights. Now, before I take this example, I think let me ask a small little question at this stage. When you look into the concept of potential voting rights, should I only see the potential voting rights of me as an investor? Or should I also look into the potential voting rights of the other investors? Because it is quite possible that my potential voting rights puts me into the position of power. And it is also quite possible that the potential right of other investors could take away my majority status. I'll just put it again, just think about it. There are two situations. I have less than majority, but I have potential voting rights, and therefore there is a possibility that I get a power or a control in the future. The second situation is that you are already a majority voting right holder, but somebody else has got potential voting rights. And when they exercise the potential voting rights, my status of a majority holder may disappear. So should I start looking into the potential voting rights of me as an investor, or I should also look into the potential voting rights of the other investors as well? What do you say? And that makes sense. We should look into the evaluation of the other investors also in this case. Okay, that's wonderful indeed. So I think let's come back. It says investor A has got a 70% voting rights of the investee, and investor B has got a 30% voting rights. On the apparent level, we can say he has got majority voting rights. There is nothing else to the contrary. I would say since he's got majority voting rights, he has got power in this case. But then we need to see the other facts. It says B has got a 30% voting rights as well as an option to acquire half the investor's A rights. He has got the option to acquire 50% of A's right. That means 35%. If he acquires 35% of A, his stake will become 30 plus 35. That makes it 65. So today, investor A has got power, but if B takes over 50% of the shares, then B will snatch away the rights. The option is exercisable for the next 2 years and is deeply out of money. And it is expected to be so for the next of the 2 years. Now, let me first ask you, if the option to exercise is deeply out of money, am I certain that B will not exercise the option? Can I say if B will not exercise the option, he will never reach a 65% stake? Can I say in this case, A gets the power? Is that correct? Yes, makes sense. So investor A has been exercising the votes, actively directing the relevant activities of the investee. Now, since it is deeply out of money, we can say he will not exercise. And he will not exercise, that he would never reach the status of a majority shareholder in this particular case. So in such a case, investor A is likely to meet the power criteria because it appears that they have the current ability to direct the relevant activities. Although B can currently exercise these options to purchase additional voting rights, it would give them a majority voting rights, but the terms and conditions are such that the options are not considered substantive. We are not going to exercise these options. And if you're not going to exercise these options, B will not be in a position to convert from a minority to a majority vote holder. I think that is simple. Let me just quickly put some few questions to you at this stage. If this option was, let's say, in at out money, can I give any conclusive conclusion, or do you think it still remains subjective? Because right now it is deeply out of money, so we are saying that B will not exercise. Let's say if it is deeply in money, B will exercise. But if you say it is in at out money, do you think the possibility of B exercising is there, or subjectivity would surround? And that's right. Because if it is in at out money, you cannot conclude in this case that B would be exercising it or not. If it is deeply in, I would say a yes. If it is deeply out, I would say no. But if it is in at out, difficult to make any assessments. Great. Let's look at the next example. The example number 10. It says investor A and two other investors each has got 1/3 of the majority rights of the investee. So it says A and there are two more investors. So there are basically three investors, and each of these investors have got 1/3 voting rights in the company. The investee's business activity is closely related to A. In addition to the equity instruments, investor A also has debt instruments convertible into ordinary shares. Can I say undoubtedly this is a case of less than majority? And what else is there in this case? I think something very visible, but still let me ask you. So this is a case where you've got less than majority rights. And what is that something else? That's right. So we've got potential voting rights in this case. And in this case, we can say again, it is subjective because it all depends whether these potential voting rights would be exercised by the investor A or not. Subjectivity could be there. It says this is out of the money. It's not deeply out. It is out of the money. It's not deeply out. So is this subjective? Because when you say that as an investor, you've got convertible debentures and we're saying it is out of money, but not deeply out of money. So I'm not certain that I will not exercise. I may or may not exercise. Subjectivity. If the debts were converted, A would get a 60% voting rights and A would benefit from realizing the synergies if the debt instruments are converted. There are two factors. If he converts, he gets a 60% stake. If he converts, he gets some synergic benefits as well. Do you think, considering that if he exercises this, he's going to get synergic benefits? He's going to become a majority shareholder. Is that incentive enough to say that possibly he would exercise these potential voting rights? First, you're going to become a majority holder. Second, in this particular case, you're going to get synergic benefits out of this particular conversion. So do you think the possibility of exercising would definitely increase? Yes. Investor A has a power over the investee because it holds voting rights with substantive potential voting rights that gives it the current ability. I think only because you are into the same kind of business, you're going to get synergic benefits in this case. I think it proves the fact that yes, there is a possibility that we will exercise these voting rights and therefore you will get power. Control, other parameters need to be seen. Wow. So I think we've done the inputs in terms of various permutations, combinations. Each of these examples had a certain kind of facts. And I think dependent upon the evaluation of the fact, some cases there was no subjectivity, some cases there was subjectivity as well. But I think I'm not making any summary of this. I'm just connecting the dots. Power means existing rights, done. Power means current ability, done. Power means that there is a right to direct relevant activities, done. The concept of power is done. Now, the only concept to be evaluated is the second step, which is exposure to variable returns. Let's go ahead. So I'm now going to work upon the step number 2. I'm now going to work upon the step number 2. That is on the concept of exposure to variable returns. Now, let me give you something very interesting to analyze at the moment. I'm going to give you two situations and carefully analyze whether you're exposed to variability of returns or not. We'll do two cases. I'll give you two cases. You need to first of all assess the step number 1. So what I'll do, I will make the assessment of step number 1, where we got step number 1, A, B, C. And I'm going to go to the step number 2 as well. And then you can go to the step 3 as well. But let's first look at step 1 and 2. Let's give you the facts of the case. Two cases. Let's say the investor has majority voting rights. There is no approval required from the regulatory authority. Is this an existing right which gives you the current ability to direct relevant activities? Yes or no? And that's right. So I think since you've got majority voting rights, I would say you definitely have existing rights, which will give you the current ability to direct the relevant activities at a future date. Agreed. Can I say if you're having majority voting rights, that means you've got ordinary shares in the company. If you've got ordinary shares in the company, you are getting dividends. Is the dividend something which is fixed, or is that variability factor is present? Your stake is by way of majority voting rights, which is ordinary share, and you are getting a dividends. So are you exposed to variability of returns? And that's right. Because as far as the dividends are concerned, these dividends are not fixed in nature. And if they're not fixed in nature, it means it is definitely variable in nature. So you are exposed to variability of returns in this case. Step one is a yes. Step number two is a yes. The linkage is automatically there. So in this case, even the control will get established. Because when you say that it is a yes to the step number one, when you say it is a yes to the step number two, then we can easily conclude that for the step number three also, it's a yes. The linkage is there, and therefore we can even reach a conclusion that the control is present. Makes sense? Now let's give you a little subjective inputs at this stage. Let's give you another facts of the case, a little more subjectivity at this stage. Let's say the investor has less than majority voting rights. The investor has got less than majority voting rights, but he's got potential voting rights. But he's got potential voting rights, which is deeply in money. Which is, let's say, deeply in money. So we're looking at two facts. The investor has got less than majority voting rights, but he's got potential voting rights, which is deeply in money. Do you think these are the existing rights which will give him the current ability to direct the relevant activities? Would the step number one ABC get met or not? And that's right. I would say definitely these are existing rights. It'll give him the current ability. Can I say provided these potential voting rights are converted into ordinary share before the date of meeting? Because in terms of options, there are two parameters. One is you need to say that number one, it is deeply in money, and number two, you will convert them before the date of the scheduled meeting in which relevant activities to be decided. Makes sense? Now let's come to the step number two. Can I say on the ordinary shares, he is getting a dividend? And can I say on the potential voting rights, let's say he's got convertible debentures? Can I say he is getting interest? So I believe the dividend is supposed to be variable. And as far as the interest is concerned, this is going to be at a fixed rate of interest. Now, since he's got ordinary shares and he's got potential voting rights, on the shares he's getting dividends, which is fluctuating, is variable in nature. But on the convertible debentures, he's getting interest, which is fixed in nature. Let me ask you, is he exposed to variable returns or not? The question is that is he exposed to variable returns in this case or not? And I get the answer yes. Now, let me clarify one thing. The standard says that you are exposed. It doesn't say that you're entitled. Mind the inputs very carefully. The standard says that there is an exposure. The word used is not entitled. The word used is not entitled. The word used is that you're exposed to variability of returns. You know, when the company has to pay me a fixed interest, then also I would say I'm exposed to variability of returns. What if the company has got a credit risk due to which they are unable to pay the money? So even though I'm entitled to a fixed rate of interest, I am still exposed to variability of returns because I may not get the interest. I'm exposed to the credit risk, a default, which might occur by the other party. So in this case, I would say the input is that you are entitled. You are entitled to fixed return. Agreed. But we are not looking at the entitlement. We can say that we are exposed. So we are entitled, but we are exposed to a variable return in this case. Reason is the reason of exposure to variability of returns is because we are exposed to credit risk. We are exposed to credit risk, a default which might occur by the company. Now you would say, so that means that every case is going to be variability of returns. Practically, yes. The standard made it very clear that for the purpose of this standard, not all, for the purpose of this standard, so they made the language very clear that for the purpose of this standard, entitlement to a fixed interest is still an exposure to variability of returns because you are entitled to a fixed return. But you're still exposed to variability because the other company, the party, they may not pay you the fixed interest. You run the credit risk of default. The company may default in terms of giving you the interest. You are entitled to the fixed interest, but you may not get the fixed interest. And therefore, they said that for the purpose of the standard, exposure and the word entitlement are two different concepts. I hope you got the picture clear. So that is on the step number 2. And I think once you say the step 1 and 2, then I think you connect the dots. And then you can easily say that there is a control because step 1 is yes, step 2 is yes, the control is there. Step 1 is no, or step 2 is yes, or the step 1 is yes, step 2 is no. In those cases, the linkage doesn't get developed, and therefore the control in that case will not be there. I hope, friends, we got a basic feel of how the subjectivity in terms of the control assessment is going to play. So far, so good. I guess you're clear with the concept. Let me also tell you something more now. If you look at the standard on the control assessment, there are basically two parts of the control assessment. One is a control assessment which is based on voting rights. And one is the concept of control assessment which is not based on voting rights, but it is based on what we call decision-making rights. Now, I don't know whether at this stage I should get more deeper in terms of explaining you the control assessment based on the other parameters. What I remember, I don't think so that there have been questions in the exams on the other area where the control assessment is done on decision-making rights. I'll go with the majority opinion. So you want me to go to the section 2 now? Tell you how the consolidation is going to be done, or you want me to give you the exposure on the second control assessment? Because there are two control assessments part. One is based on voting rights, which we have covered. Then there is another control assessment, which is based on not the voting rights, but is based on a decision-making rights. So if you want, we can come back to that part later. And we can go to the block number 2, considering the consolidation accounting process, or you want me to do it at this stage, then I do it at this stage. So I get the inputs that we do consolidation. Let's get more votes on that. So what do you want me to do, friends, at this stage? Your discretion? No, I want your majority votes as well, because considering the importance of things, I think I wanted to put that question. So consolidation or more on the control assessment. Okay, somebody tells me, so do it now, please. Okay, so we got 2 votes. One is on the discretion and one is do it now. I need one more vote to decide things. Okay, I got another vote, so do it now. So somebody says consolidation. Okay, so I think let's do it in the flow. Let's give you some insights. We'll not get deep into it. But I think since we are discussing the concept of control, let's close it at this stage. So let's now come to the other aspect of control assessment. So I am again coming to the concept of a control assessment. Earlier control assessment was on voting rights. Now the control assessment is not on the voting rights, but it is on the basis of what we call decision-making rights. It is called decision-making rights. So I think I'll first explain the inputs to you in this case. Just to connect the dots, I'm just making a mention that the earlier concept which we did, the earlier control assessment which we did, the earlier control assessment was based on voting rights. So what we did earlier is based on the concept of voting rights. Then there is something more which is given based on what I call DMR, that is decision making rights. DMR, that is called decision making rights. Now, let me first of all give you a background in terms of assessing that why we are looking at a control assessment based on a decision making rights. What kind of situations are there when we're going to apply this parameter? Let me, I think, first take you to something. So I'm taking you to the inputs in terms of para number B60. This is the guidance in para number B60, and which gives you the inputs in terms of control assessment based on a decision making rights in this case. A decision maker, it says a decision maker shall consider the overall relationship between itself, the investee being managed, and the other parties involved with the investee. Now you would say decision maker, what do you mean by decision maker? Let's say my company establishes a fund where I am taking money from other investors and I'm putting that money in the fund. So here we're referring to a fund manager. Here we're referring to, you can say, a situations of mutual funds. So when you're looking at a control based on a decision-making rights, we're looking at the concept of the fund manager. The fund manager basically pools the funds and then he makes an investment of those funds in different securities. Now, in this particular case, we need to see that is the fund manager merely acting as an agent of the other parties, or is he acting as a principal? So the standard gave us the parameters of how do you assess that is the fund manager in control of the fund or not. So when you say a decision maker, here the decision maker refers to the fund manager. And when you're looking at the concept of the fund manager, we need to see that is he acting as a principal or agent. So we need to evaluate and see that is he acting as a principal or is he acting as an agent? Now, how do you evaluate whether he's acting as a principal or he's acting as an agent is something which we're going to develop. But the standard said that when you're looking into a fund manager, he may not have enough voting rights. Because there is no concept of voting rights in this case, he's only acting on behalf of the other parties, investing money into the fund. So we need to see that is he acting as a principal? Is he in a complete control of taking decisions related to the fund? Or is he acting as an agent of the other parties? If you conclude that he's acting as a principal, we will say he's got a control. But if you say he's acting as an agent, then in that particular case, we'll say, no, he does not get a control. So the evaluation is now required to understand that as a fund manager, do you control the fund? Are you acting as a principal? You control the fund. And if you're acting as an agent, you do not control the fund. Now, for this purpose, the standard gave us a total of 4 parameters. It says you have to determine whether it is acting as an agent or whether he is acting as a principal. Now, there are 2 parameters, A and B, and there are another 2 parameters, C and D. When you look at A and B, it is assessment of power. When you look at C and D, it is the evaluation of exposure to variable returns. So now we are saying that there are 2 elements of power. So you need to look at 2 elements for power and you need to look at 2 elements for exposure to variable returns. Now let me explain this to you. When we'll do the practical illustrations, you'll get the connect better. But let me at least first expose you to the larger concept. The first is called the scope of decision-making authority. And the second is called the rights by other parties. I need to see that as a fund manager, what is the scope of your decision making? Is it wide or is it narrow? I'll put the parameters again. So when I'm looking at the scope of the decision making, I am wanting to see, is the scope of decision making wide, or is the scope of decision making something which we can say is narrow? Now, how would you decide that the decision making authority is wide or the decision making authority is narrow? That we'll see. But we need to see that is the fund manager got a complete discretion to decide? I'll tell you something. For example, a fund manager, they have decided that they are going to invest only in terms of, let's say, real estate sector. So the fund is managed in such a way that there is a mandate by other investors that all this money is going to be put, let's say, in terms of real estate. Now, this does not mean that his discretion is got, narrow. I may be mandated. I may be mandated by other investors that I can put in money only in terms of real estate. That does not mean that my decision making authority is got narrow, because I'm only mandated to put money into a specific kind of investment. That does not reduce my decision making. Now, when I say that I need to put it in a real estate, I am free to put it in any type of company. There might be hundreds of companies in the real estate. So as a fund manager, I'm not restricted in terms of which companies I will invest. It is only that I am asked by the other investors that you're going to put money only in the real estate. That doesn't make my decision-making authorities narrow. Because if I've got a complete discretion that within a real estate industry, I can park the money in which kind of securities, I would say my decision-making is wider. So the first thing we're going to look at is the scope of the decision-making. That as an investor, as a fund manager, is the scope wide? If you say it is wide, you're getting power. If you say it is narrow, you're not getting power. But apart from this, you also need to see the rights of other parties. And the rights of other parties is typically in terms of what we call removal rights. When we look at the rights of the other parties, the rights of the other parties would be typically in terms of what we call the removal rights. Now, when I say removal rights, the other investors can easily remove the fund manager and appoint somebody else as a fund manager. Then the rights of the other parties is going to be something which is substantive in nature. And if it is substantive in nature, it can snatch away the power which the fund manager gets. But let's say, for example, if the rights of the other parties to remove the fund manager is merely protected, they will only remove the fund manager when they know that he is not acting in the best interest of the fund. And then they say, no, we don't want him. So, but they will remove him only when the need arises, when they feel that, he is not acting in the best interest, but they don't remove it, just like that. So we'll have to see that as a fund manager, you've got decisions which are wide, or you've got decision-making rights which are narrow. And then we need to see, along with your rights, to take decisions, we need to see the rights of other parties. Can they remove you or they may not remove you? If they've got right to remove you, it is substantive. Then you will not get a power. I'll make some combinations, but what you need to see in terms of power, you need to see the rights of the fund manager. You need to see the rights of the other investors, whether they've got right to remove the fund manager easily or not. And then comes the concept of exposure. The remuneration to which he is entitled. The remuneration to which he is entitled. Now you will say remuneration means a salary. The fund manager is getting a certain salary. If he's getting a certain salary, isn't he getting a fixed salary? He is entitled to a fixed salary, but he's exposed to variability of returns. Because today I tell a person, an employee, that I'm going to give you a salary, but he's running a risk in terms of default. What if I'm not in a position to pay his salary? The standard says this remuneration is getting variable in nature. Is always concerned, doesn't make a difference. It exposes him to variability of returns for sure. And the next is the decision maker's exposure to variability of returns. And on behalf of the other parties, you decide that let me also make an investment. So it says we need to see what do you hold in the investee company. And now the subjectivity part is different weightings shall be applied to each of the factors on the basis of particular facts and circumstances. Now you would say, sir, I am a little confused in terms of what is happening on this level. I think let me just connect the dots before we start working on this element. So let me just connect the dots what we are discussing. Let me just go back. Now what we are discussing in this particular case is, in this particular case, when you're looking at a decision-making rights, we're looking at a fund manager. He is the person who has got decision-making rights. So as we're going to look at the facts of the case, now please see this carefully. This is where I'm going to give you the chain of thought. So as a fund manager, I will say, in order to assess whether he controls the fund or not, let us see whether he's got power. And let's see whether he's got exposure, to variable returns. So what I'm going to do in this case, as a fund manager, if you want to see that he's got power, I will look into two factors. I will look into the decision-making rights of the fund manager. And along with this, I will look into the removal rights. I will look into the removal rights of the other parties. So when I look at the concept of power, we need to look into two factors, decision-making rights, and we need to see the removal rights. Now, please watch the combinations carefully. As a decision-making rights of the fund manager, either he's got wide decision-making rights or he's got narrow decision-making rights. If he's got wide decision-making rights, he's free to decide where to invest. I will not conclude he's got power. I will not conclude at this stage he's got a power. I will move on and see, are the removal rights something which is major, substantive, or it is merely something which is protective? The other parties can easily remove him. They've got substantive rights. Or the other parties cannot remove him easily. They've got protective rights. Now, let me give you some combinations and you decide whether there is a power or not. A fund manager has got wide decision-making rights. And the other parties can remove me only when it concerns them protective in nature. Do you think as a fund manager, I've got power? So I'm looking at the permutation combinations that I'm saying that as a fund manager, I've got wide decision-making rights. That is one. And the other parties can remove me only when there is a need to protect themselves, protective rights. Do you think I get a power? Yes. Now let's look at another combination. As a fund manager, my rights are narrow. And the other parties can easily remove me. They've got substantive rights of removing me. Do you think as a fund manager, I get power? And that's right, no. So I'm now thinking of four permutations combinations. Let's give you the four permutations combinations and you decide whether there is a power or it is subjective. So either you will say, yes, there is a power, or you will say, no, there is a power, or you will say it is subjective in nature. We cannot say anything conclusive. Let's give you the combination. I have, as a fund manager, I've got wide decision-making rights. And the other parties have got protective rights of removal. Do I get power? So I have wide decision-making rights. And the other parties can remove me only when they want to protect, I get a power. Great. Number two, I've got wide decision-making rights. And the other parties have got substantive rights to remove me whenever they want. Do you think I get a power? And that's right, no. I may be having wide powers, but they can easily remove me, so I do not get power. Number three, I've got narrow decision making rights, and they've got substantive rights to remove me whenever they want. Do I get power? First of all, it's narrow and they've got substantive rights. So do you think I get power? And that's right now. Let's look at the fourth combination. I've got narrow decision making rights and they've got protective removal rights. Power, no power, judgmental. So I've got narrow decision making rights. The removal rights are again protective in nature. So confirmed power, or we can say subjective in nature. That's right, judgmental. So you can say the four permutations, combinations. We can have wide plus substantive, wide plus protective, narrow plus substantive, narrow plus protective. So these are the four permutation combinations. Don't worry, we'll pen them down later. So when you look at the concept of power assessment for a fund manager, you need to see his decision-making rights. You need to see the other party's right to remove him and accordingly take a call. Next. When you look at the concept of exposure to variable returns, there are two elements. One is the remuneration. One is the remuneration which the fund manager is getting. And as I said, the remuneration which the fund manager gets in this particular case is always considered variable. It is always considered variable in nature. So if I say that even if he's getting a fixed salary, it will always be considered to be something which is exposing him to variability of returns. So it's always variable, even if it is fixed. The standard is very clearly said that a fixed remuneration which a fund manager gets, that also exposes him to variability of returns because he's entitled to a fixed salary, but then he's still exposed because of the risk that he may not be paid the salary. Along with this, what you need to do, you need to consider that is the fund manager also invested in the fund? Is the fund manager also invested in the fund? So we'll also look into that, is he invested into the fund or not? Now, if he's invested into the fund, we would say that he should invest at least, a minimum to minimum 20% or more. Though this is not given in the standard, but we expect, if he wants to get exposed, to variability of returns, he must invest at least around 20% or more money into the fund as well. It is only when he is invested 20% or more than that, the variability of return exposure will increase. So when we're going to look at the assessment of a control for a fund manager, I will say, let me see his rights to take decisions. Let me see other people's right in terms of removing him. And that will give me the assessment of the concept of power. And then we'll look into the exposure to variability of returns. In terms of exposure to variability of returns, we're going to see that he's getting a remuneration which is variable always in nature. But simply his remuneration may not expose him to that level of variability. So we need to see the other factor as well. And we need to see that has he as a fund manager also invested some money into the funds? If he's invested money at least 20% or more, he is significantly exposed to variability of return. So if you say in terms of power, yes. If you say in terms of exposure, yes, we will say there is a control. Now we just need to do one thing. We need to conceptually visualize the permutations, combinations out of this power and the exposure concept to decide when a control will come. So what I'm going to do, I will make an interesting chart, at least, conceptualizing these parameters, that is the parameters of power and these parameters in terms of exposure. Look at the permutations, combinations and see that is there going to be a control? Is there going to be no control, or is it going to be subjective in nature? So I think based on that, we will be able to get into the case studies doing the control assessment of this part as well. But I think before that, it's time to give you a little break as well. I'm sure you need one. So, but don't worry. I think if something is still going, how do we connect all these dots? Don't worry. First, I'll make a chart to you indicating you the permutations, combinations of these parameters, and then we'll do case studies on that, and that'll complete the concept of control assessment in this case. So shouldn't the exposure be fixed logically, then variable for providing a control? No, 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 no. You see, if you're saying that you're exposed to a fixed return, where is the risk? And if there is no risk, how do you control a company? In order to say that you control a company, in this particular case, you take decisions which impact the returns of the investee. And because of those variable returns of the investee, you get impacted. If my decision has got no impact on my returns, I don't control the company. Because if I want to control the company, I would want that, if the return fluctuates to a good level, I get better returns in life. But if the returns of the investee goes down, it's my bad luck. So I think the concept of control stems out of the fact that you are in a position to influence the profitability of the investee company. When I am a decision maker, I decide the fate of the profitability, but at the same time, I also get exposed to it. So the fixed returns would never expose me to risk. And if you're not exposed to risk, you are not a part of the control assessment. Got it. Now, that's wonderful indeed. Okay, so I think let's first give you a break, friend, 10, 12 minutes, and then I think we'll start back on this. So please enjoy your break. I'm going to start it back, connect the dots, and do some case studies with you. Thank you. Relaxed. I think let's first connect a few dots before we do questions on this area of control assessment, which is based on DMR. That's what I call decision making rights. So I think let's make some permutation combinations chart. Let's also ask you a few questions in between. So this is a combination chart which we are creating. So I think let me create the concept of power and the concept of exposure. So we can say this is the concept of power, where we're looking at two combinations, that is rights of fund manager, and let's consider the rights of other parties. The rights of other parties. When I say rights of other parties, we're referring to removal rights. So this we are referring to the removal rights, whether they can remove the fund manager or not. So these are two elements of power. Then we consider exposure to variable returns. And there are two elements. So one is the remuneration, and one is the amount which is invested in fund, which will expose him to variability of returns. And then we get the linkage. And then we will decide, is there a power or not? So let's give you some permutations, combinations to begin with. And I think you can give me the inputs in this case. So let's consider the first element, and that is rights of the fund manager is, let's say, wide. The rights of other parties, let's say, protective. So what do you say? Is there a power or not? Wide decision-making rights. So when I say rights, here we are referring to decision-making rights. So this I'm putting it as DMR. He's got wide decision-making rights and it is protective, and rightly said, this will definitely lead to power. So let's, I think, concentrate on this only right now. Second, let's say it is wide and it is substantive in nature. Let's say it is wide and it is substantive in nature. The removal rights of the other parties is quite substantive, and that's right, I would say power does not come. So these are the two basic combinations. If you notice, I've taken wide with a combination of protective and with a combination of substantive. Next, let's consider it is narrow, and let's consider it is substantive in nature. So what do you say? Is there going to be a power in this case? It's narrow decision making and the removal rights is substantive in nature. That's right, there is no power in this case. And can I say if it is a combination of narrow as well as protective in nature? So what do you say? Is there a power, or is this something which is subjective in nature? Wonderful indeed. So this is subjective in nature. I'm just thinking, is there any other combination which could happen in terms of power, or this seems to be an exhaustive list of permutations combination? Wide with substantive and protective, narrow with substantive and protective. Only one case which you can see that there is a power when it is wide and it is protective in nature. The rest of the cases, either there is no power or we can say it is subjective in nature. So this is permutations, combinations, exhaustive list. Let's look at another input. Can you say the remuneration will always expose to variable returns? But it's never going to be significant enough to say a decision. So let's take the combination. It is below 20%. He invested in the fund but it is below 20%. Do you think he's exposed to variability of returns in this case? He's getting a remuneration which is variable, but his investment is below 20%. So that's rightly said, no. And this is again always a voting power. But let's say he's got 20% or more. Do you think in this case exposure to variable return arises? And I get yes, definitely yes. I think these are the two permutations, combinations which could arise in this case. So when you say that, you're looking at the parameter of exposure, the only input is the money which you invest as a fund manager. If your investment is below 20, you're not exposed significantly. Otherwise, you're exposed significantly. Now, depending upon the permutations and combination. So when you say in this particular case, the power and the exposure, the funda is the same. If you look at the power and the exposure, if you say yes, there is a power, yes, there is an exposure, I would say yes, you control. If you say either of them as a yes or no, so either of them is a yes or no, I would say there is no control in this case. So if you say yes to both the steps, the third step automatically the linkage gets proven. So this is a summary in terms of the decision-making rights. So I hope this combination is going to help you now to take decisions with reference to the control assessment when you are appointed as a fund manager on behalf of the other parties. Right, friends, I think we're ready now to do some case studies with you on this area. Let's begin the journey. Okay, so how should I share the file? It's not allowed for me to share here. I think you'll have to mail it across, in that case, the email of the ICAI, because I will not be allowed to share my mail like that. Okay, so let's, I think, begin with the inputs. I'll probably take let's first take example number 13. So this is again in the appendix, example number 13. So once you establish there is a control, he's acting as a principal. Otherwise, he'll be acting as an agent. I hope, friends, this is visible enough. Good to go, I guess. Is it visible, right?
From the study material, sir?
No, this is in the appendix to the standard. So I think it's in the study material also. It is there in the study mat, but I've just taken this from the example appendix to the standard. Visible, right? Can I start reading this? Otherwise, I'll cut it across if this is not visible. So is this visible enough, right? Yes, okay. It says a decision maker, a fund manager, establishes, markets, and manages a publicly traded regulated fund according to narrowly defined parameters set out in the investment mandate. Now, don't come to the conclusion that the decision-making rights are narrow. There are only some narrow defined parameters. He's only saying there are some narrow defined parameters set out in the investment mandate as required by local rules and regulation. The fund was marketed to investors as an investment in a diversified portfolio of publicly traded entities. Now it says within the defined parameters, the fund manager has got a discretion about the assets in which to invest. So would you like to tell me that is when you look at the concept of power and you look at the rights of the fund manager? So what do you say the rights of the fund manager in this case is discretion, is narrow or is it wide? It says within those parameters, he's got a discretion about the assets in which to invest. And that's right. I would say it is definitely wide. Now, another element which needs to be seen is the rights of other parties. The other thing to be seen is the rights of the other parties, which we will see as we read further. Then he says the fund manager made a 10% investment in the fund. Now, when it says 10% investment, I'm looking at the exposure to variable returns. And then there are two parameters. The first one I'm looking at is the investment in the fund. That's 10%, merely 10%. Do you think the step number two is going to be met? Do you think he's exposed to variability of returns, which is significant enough because he's invested only 10%, which is below 20%? And that's right, no. I think the other facts may not give me anything, but still we'll read. He receives a market-based fee, which is 1% of the net asset value. So in this particular case, the fees which he is getting is 1%, and this is definitely variable in nature. And this is also variable in nature, but we can say put together, it is not significant. It is not significant in nature. The fees which he's getting is got a variability of return. The 10% money is invested has got a variability of return, but this variability is not significant enough to prove that he's exposed to variability of returns. Let's go further. The fund manager does not have any obligation to fund losses beyond 10%. And then it says the fund is not required to establish and has not established any independent board of directors. The investors do not have any substantive rights that would affect the decision-making authorities of the fund manager. So when he says that they do not have any substantive rights, that means these are merely protective in nature. They're merely protective in nature. So let me now put the questions to you. Do you think the power is there? We're just looking at the power. Decision-making rights are wide and the rights of other parties are protective in nature. Does he get a power? Yes. But in this particular case, do you think he gets exposure to significant returns? No. Now, if you connect the dots, the first step is yes, the second step is no. So can I say, is there a control? No. Is he acting as a principal or is he acting as an agent? He's maybe acting as an agent. He's not getting a control. He's not exposed to variability of return. So he's merely acting as an agent of the other investor. He is not a principal. I hope, friends, you got the connects clear.
So do we have to
Okay.
make this conclusion also that he's acting as a principal or an agent, or simply
Yes.
he
Yes.
gets no control?
Yes, because once you evaluate the parameters of power and the exposure, you need to give a conclusion. Is he acting as a principal? Then control. If he's acting as an agent, no control. So principal agent will be mentioned.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so that's right. So I think let's maybe go ahead. I'm not reading the answer out here. Let's go further. Now there are some interesting combinations coming in. Example number 14, which has got some variations. So example number 14, we're looking at some variations now. Okay, so here again, what we'll do, we will evaluate the concept of power and we'll evaluate the concept of exposure to variable returns. And in terms of power, we've got two elements, decision-making rights of the fund manager. And we're looking at the removal rights. We're looking at the removal rights of the other parties. And exposure to variable returns, we're looking at remuneration and the amount which he has invested in the fund and through which we will be able to evaluate the parameters. Let's begin. A decision maker establishes, markets and manages a fund that provides investment opportunities to a number of investors. The decision maker must make decisions in the best interest of all the investors in accordance with the fund's governing agreements. Nonetheless, the fund manager has got a wide decision-making discretion. So let me put the question obvious one. What is the rights of the decision-making rights of the fund manager, wide or narrow? And that's right. It is supposed to be wide in nature, instructed very clear. The manager receives a market-based fee, which is 1% of the asset and 20% of the funds. I guess that definitely exposes to variability of return. I will not even, apply much of a mind in terms of the remuneration part. So because the remuneration is fixed or variable, it definitely exposes you to variability of returns. But let me also make it clear, the variability of returns is not significant enough. The concept whether exposure is significant will always be decided with what is the percentage stake the fund manager has invested. And then it says, although it must make decisions in the best interest, he's got extensive decision making authority, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, these are the two inputs given for 14. Now, other factors are given in 14 ABC. So this is a common fact to all the example 14 ABC. So common facts. Now we're looking at 14A. Each example is in isolation. So we'll look at the removal rights, we'll look at the investments and decide. It says the fund manager has got a 2% investment in the fund. If he's got 2% investment in the fund, there is a variability, but is it significant or not significant? Just 2% money invested into the fund. So can I say there is not significant enough? That's right. So can I conclude he's acting as an agent without even looking into the other facts of the case? Because in any case, the step number 2, exposure, will fail. Even if there is a power, exposure is not there, control cannot be established. Makes sense. Though I think we'll still go further. It says the fund manager is not obligation to bear losses more than 2%. Investors can remove the fund manager by a simple majority only for a breach of contract. So do you think it is protective or do you think it is substantive? And that's right, it is completely protective in nature because they can remove him by a simple majority, but they will do so only for a breach of contract. So it is protective in nature. Now let's, I think, connect the dots. Let's talk in terms of power. With a wide decision-making authority and protective rights of removal, do you think the fund manager gets a power? Oh, no, power is yes, because this is wide and this is protective. So power is, of course, a yes. But does he get exposure to variable returns? No. So I think in this particular case, there is no control. So he's acting as an agent. The linkage is not developed. He's got no control, merely acting as an agent. Well, so that's simple. Let's look at 14B and C. The initial facts are same. Now we're looking at 14B and 14C. So let me just, I think, remind you the facts in terms of power. So we said if you look at the decision-making rights, it was wide. If you look at the removal rights of the other parties, we'll see. And then if you look at the exposure to variable returns, so one is the remuneration, which is definitely variable in nature. And one is the amount which is invested in the funds, which we'll see. So let's, I think, read the inputs further. It says the fund manager has got more substantial pro rata investment. Now, when it says more substantial pro rata investment, I believe substantial means more than 20. So when you say that it is substantial in nature, is the exposure significant enough now? So he's got a substantial stake in the company. Yes. So we can say the exposure is definitely significant. Exposure to variability is there. Then he says they can remove the fund manager by simple majority, but only for a breach of contract. So as we said earlier, it is protective in nature. Okay, let's put the questions now to you. If you consider now, does he get a power? Wide decision-making rights with the removal rights protective in nature? Yes, there is a power. Significant, you can say exposure to variability of returns. So if you connect this, that's right. He is acting as a principal. He has got a control over the fund. So we can conclude, yes, he's got a control. That's great. Wonderful indeed. Let's go to the example number 14C now, and then I think we close this assessment. The fund manager has got a 20% pro rata investment. So I think these facts are quite similar to this as well. So I think we'll definitely say that there is an exposure to variability of returns. Then he says the board appoints the fund manager annually. The board appoints the fund manager annually. If the board decided not to renew the fund manager, the services of the fund manager could be performed by other managers in the industry. So do you think the removal rights are protected, or is it substantive in nature? They appoint every year. So if they appoint every year, they do not renew the agreement. It is definitely substantive in nature. So in this particular case, do you think there is a power, wide decision making, but substantive removal rights? So will there be a power? No. So no power with exposure. That again makes him an agent, no linkage, and therefore there is no control in this particular case. Wow. So I think that gives us the insight, connects the dots in terms of the control assessment, which is based on decision-making rights. Okay, so all thing is done. So I guess this is taken care. I guess now, friends, before we move further on the consolidation level, I think let's first ask your comfort zone, as I generally ask you on a scale of 10. If you were to assess your comfort zone on a control assessment, both on the voting rights and the decision-making rights, what is your comfort zone on a scale of 10 on this area? 10 out of 10, brilliant. 10 out of 10, that's brilliant indeed. Super. Okay, so I think I got the inputs 10 out of 10 from all. That's wonderful indeed. Super. This is done. Our block number 1 is now taken care. So let me now come to the second area with you. Just deleting those slides so that the connect is there. Yes, this is all done. So now let's come to the next area of discussion with you. That is the consolidation process. Or I think maybe we can first do a small little question, I guess. So there is one question which I remember is there in the revisionary test paper. So you want me to do that one question which is going to give you a control assessment, or shall we go to the next one? Okay, so I think yes, we get an answer. Let me just share that example with you. Yes, here we've got a question. Let me just zoom this to you. So based on all the learnings, this is a question which came in RTP in May 2019. So we'll read the facts of the case and decide. Right, so I think let's have a read on the facts of the case. It is RTP question. So based on the learnings which we have taken, we're going to first of all solve this, then we go to the block number 2. It says Angel adopted Ind AS with a transition date April 17. So I don't know whether you can tell me this or not, but can you tell me that if the transition date is 1st April 17, what is my current financial year? Because when you transit it, you apply Ind AS 101. I don't know if you've done 101 or not, but I'm sure you would know that transition date is the beginning of the previous year. And that's right. So, no, not April 16. This is the date of transition. That means you made 17-18 as the previous year and 18-19 is supposed to be the current year. So you would have made a comparative for 17-18 and the current year for 18-19. So we can say the transition date is 1st April 17, opening of the previous year. Prior to the Ind AS adoption, it followed accounting standards notified under the Accounting Standard Rules 2006, hereinafter referred as IGAP. It has made investments in equity shares of pharma, a listed company engaged in the business of pharmaceutical. The shareholding pattern of pharma is given. So Angel has got 21% stake. Little Angel, it says, refer the note number 2, has got a 24% stake. Wealth Master has got a 3%, note 3, and the public shareholders is 52. So one thing is very clear that individual public holding is 52%. Can I say, is this case less than majority? Considering the facts so far given to me, that if 52% belongs to the individual shareholders, this investor in any case is less than majority. Yes. So looking at this chart, we can see that this is less than majority voting rights. So we'll have to see what kind of combinations is working on. But let's read the note number 2, 3, 4. It says none of the shareholders have entered into any shareholders agreement. So they're not entered into shareholders agreement. I think the first case of contractual arrangement is out of the picture. Then he says Little Angel is a subsidiary of Angel under Ind AS in which it has got a 51% voting power. Let's, I think, visualize. So we can say we've got the company Angel, and it says Little Angel is a subsidiary of Angel. So this is Little Angel. So it says Little Angel is a subsidiary of Angel in which he's got a 51% stake. Now we can see that Angel has got 21% in pharma. So there is a company pharma, and I'm given that Angel has got 21% stake and Little Angel has got a 24% stake in pharma. So the parent company directly has got a 21% and the Little Angel, which is the subsidiary, has got a 24%. Now let me tell you one thing point blank at this stage. So when you go to consider the percentage, I'll take this as 21 plus 24. We're not going to consider that this is 51% of 24. We don't consider that it is 51% of 24. When you establish a relationship, we take the total percentage. So it'll be considered that Angel and Little Angel together has got a 45% stake in this company. But still, it makes it less than majority. Let's read further. Then he says Wealth Master Mutual Fund is not a related party either of Angel or Pharma, so he is an outside investor. The individual public shareholdings is 17,455 individuals and none of which is more than 1% voting power. Now let me ask you something. If you look at the facts till this stage itself, though you will mention all this in your analysis if this kind of assessment comes. But let me, I think, make some conclusions at this stage and you can vouch me. Looking at the facts right now, there is nothing else. Can I say, if I look at the absolute size of the investor, 45%, and I look at the relative size of this investor, it seems that he's the single largest investor of pharma. Correct. Because he's got a 45%, so absolute size is big, relative size is also quite big. So he's the single largest investor of Pharma Limited. That's right. So I think apparently, if there are no things other than the contrary, we can say yes, chances are that he may get a power or a control. Now let's read further. All the commercial decisions of pharma are taken by the directors who are appointed by a simple majority of vote of the shareholders in the AGM. And the following table shows the voting pattern in the past AGM. So decisions are taken by directors and they're appointed by simple majority of vote. And he's now giving you what is the historical experiences in these AGMs. Now let's have a look at how all these investors have historically acted. A wonderful question indeed. This is based on the practical insights of when you do a control assessment, you start looking into the historical experiences. One is you look at the percentages held. Second is you start looking into the historical experiences in terms of AGM, how people are acting. Let's go ahead. As far as Angel is concerned and Little Angel is concerned, who together have got a 45% stake in the company, see what it says. They attended and voted in favor of all the resolutions. He also attended and voted as per the directions of Angel, which means they're always acting together. So whether it is 2013 fortunes of the parent company. Now let's come to the master fund. It says it attended and voted in favor of all resolutions except for reappointment of retiring directors. Can I say he is being one investor who is being, disagreeing on certain issue on the retiring partner, retiring director. So he says when there is a reappointment of the retiring director, he raises, issues that not. So that means he doesn't go in consensus with these people. Then he says individual, 7% of the individuals attended the AGM. 8% attended the AGM. 6% attended the AGM. It seems that on an average, only 7% attend the AGM. So they don't even attend the AGM. So I think though there are 52% in nature. Now just imagine, I'm just coming to the figures. The wealth investor has got, wealth mutual fund has got 3%. And out of all the individuals, 52%, only 7% come. His 3 plus 7 makes it 10. Do you think those other investors are in a position or do historically they disagree with Angel or Little Angel? And that's right, no. Because these people do vote against, but these people hardly attend the meetings. And let's see what they do. All the shareholders voting for all the resolutions except 50% voted against the resolution to appoint a retiring director. So same goes for these next 2 years as well. Now, considering the fact that, he's got a 3%, on an average, he's got 7%, and only 50% dissent. So this also makes it like 3.5. So you can say almost like 6.5% disagree with the decisions taken by the majority. Are we coming to the conclusion that there is definitely a control of Angel and Little Angel? The people who deviate from the decisions is merely around 6.5% of the total. Yes, I would say yes. Let's read more inputs now. Then he says Pharma has obtained a substantial long-term borrowings from a bank, and the loan is repayable in 20 years from 1st April 17. As per the terms of the borrowing, Pharma will require a prior approval of the bank. So the following actions of Pharma would need an approval by the banker. The lender needs to, has a say in terms of certain decision. Payment of dividends, buyback of shares, issue of bonus shares, amalgamation of Pharma, obtaining additional loans. Do you think these are all relevant activities? All these actions requires the approval of the bank. So do you think these are all relevant activities where the banker has got a say? Yes. I would say they're definitely relevant activities in nature. Let's read further. It says recently the board of directors proposed a dividend of 5 rupees per share. However, the CFO of Pharma approached the bank. For obtaining their approval, the bank rejected the proposal, citing concerns over short-term cash liquidity of Pharma. Having learned about the developments, the directors of Angel, along with the directors of Little Angel, approached the bank to reconsider the decision. The directors of Angel and Little Angel urged the bank to approve a reduced dividend of at least 2 rupees per share. So first of all, the board of directors proposed a dividend of 5. The bankers said no. Then little angel and angel went to the bankers and said, if not 5, let's give a 2 rupees dividend per share. And the bankers again categorically refused to approve any payout of dividends. Now the question is, with this kind of a scenario, do you think the bankers are acting in their interest in protective in nature, or do you think the rights are substantive in nature? They've given a huge long-term loans to the long-term borrowings to the company pharma. So they say every time you want to take crucial decisions impacting the cash liquidity, please ask me. And when it came to the dividend decisions, they said the company is already facing a liquidity crunch. I'll not allow you to pay dividends. So in this case, is this considered substantive, or do you think it is protective in nature? Okay, you said substantive, but I think this is merely protective in nature. The reason is the bankers have given a huge money. And I think their concern is that if you pay dividend to the shareholders, they will get deprived of the right to get interest in the company. So they're looking at their own interest. They're looking at their own interest that if the company pays dividends, there will be a liquidity crisis. So they speak when their interests are impacted. So I think they're not, saying something without a reason. It is to protect their own rights. So I think it is protective in nature. Under ICAI, Angel is classified as an associate because it was below 50. As the CFO of Angel, you're required to comment on the correct classification of pharma on the date of transition. So considering all the facts of the case, majority shareholder, no, I'm less than majority. The bankers have got rights which are protective in nature. The pattern of the meeting indicates that, Angel and little angel, they take decisions. Other people, 6.5% merely, dissent to the decisions. So do you think we can reach a conclusion that there is a control? Can we reach a conclusion based on the facts of the cases that there is a control? I would say yes, definitely. So that was a brilliant question. It came in RTP in May 2019, exposing you to the concept of this. Is this on voting rights, or is this on a decision-making rights? Is this a control assessment based on DMR or VR? That's right. It is definitely on the voting right concept. There's no concept of fund manager. In this case, it is based on the voting rights. Right, so far so good. So I guess this is done. So this takes care of my one section on consolidation. The scope of the standard and the control assessment is done. Now we are going to go to the next section, how consolidation is done. Now friends, before I start with the consolidation process, let me, give you, one or two inputs very clear. I'm not assuming that you know consolidation. I'm not assuming that you've done consolidation at intermediate level. Even if you've done, your initial techniques and my techniques will definitely match. But as I'm going to go further, my techniques may not match with your techniques of solving the question. So my disclaimer, you'll have to forget what you know. You'll have to relearn with the concept in terms of consolidation. Trust me, if you're going to, reconcile with what you've done and what I'm going to teach you, you will make a bank reconciliation statement which will never tally. So my sincere piece of advice and my sincere request and I would insist, please do not follow your old technique. If you want to go with my technique, initially, of course, you'll not see any differences. What I'm going to start today, you're not going to see any differences. But what I'm going to do in the next year, yes, you heard me correct. What I'm going to do in the next year, our next class falls in the next year. So in that particular case, what I'm going to give you in the next year is going to be, slightly different from your technique. But please stick to my technique. I am going to develop a 7-step model where we can handle the toughest and the toughest kind of questions as well. If the time permits, I will also take you to one of the comprehensive questions on consolidation. We'll try to capture a complicated question on consolidated balance sheet and on the consolidated income statement both. Now, let's proceed with the consolidation technique. I'm going to take now a very simple example. to explain you the art of consolidation. Watch this example carefully. The idea is, first of all, to give you a logic of how consolidation occurs. After the logics are understood, I'm going to translate this into a step-by-step approach. So initially, I'll give you logics, then I'll translate all those logics into a procedural kind of concept. Because once you know the logics, trust me, consolidation becomes more procedural in nature. You just need to keep a track. Okay, this is how we do with this particular adjustment. Let's begin. So we are on the block number 2. We are on the block number 2, which is on the consolidation procedures. We are talking in terms of the consolidation procedures. So we need to learn the art of consolidating the balance sheet as well as the art of consolidating the income statement as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first expose you to the art of making a consolidated balance sheet. So we're going to first look at the consolidated balance sheet. So let's do one thing. For a basic understanding, I'm giving you a T-shaped balance sheet. For a basic understanding, I'm giving you a T-shaped balance sheet. Let's say this is the balance sheet of the holding company. Let's say on December X1. This is the balance sheet of the subsidiary, let's say on December X1. Let's say the holding company acquired in the subsidiary on December X1 100% shares. So let me tell you what is the crucial aspect in this case. There is no NCI and the consolidation is on acquisition date. So I'm going to call this as case 1. I'm going to call this as case number 1. There is no NCI because 100% shares of the parent is with the subsidiary, is held in the subsidiary, and we are considering a consolidated balance sheet on date of acquisition itself. So we want to look into the consolidation technique where there are two assumptions: no NCI, 100% wholly owned subsidiary, and the consolidation is on the acquisition date. Let's make this as a consolidated balance sheet that is on December X1. So let's take some arbitrary figures to fill in to make the consolidated balance sheet. Let's say this is non-current assets. Let's say this is investment in the subsidiary. And let's say this is current assets. Let's say this is equity share capital, and this I'm taking as other equity. This is other equity, and I'm considering the current liabilities as well. So just taken some random figures at this stage. I've taken non-current assets, investment, and current assets. And here also I will take non-current assets, and I'll take the current assets, equity share capital, other equity, and let's consider the current liabilities. I'll just take some arbitrary figures at this stage to prove my process. Let's consider that the non-current asset is 200. Let's say this is 100. Let's say this is 50. And let's say this investment is 300. And let's consider the equity share capital is 100. And this is 150. So I think my balance sheet is tallied 300, 300. Yes. Let's take this as 500. This is 200. And let's consider this is 200. And this is 100. And let's say this is 700. So I guess my balance sheet is agreed. I think both the balance sheets are in perfect agreement. Now, let me ask you a very simple question to begin with. You already have the background of Ind AS 103. I'm going to use that background in terms of 110. Can you tell me what is the net assets of the subsidiary company? Analyze and tell me what is the net assets of the subsidiary company at this stage. What's this? And decide the net assets. So you just need to work out the net assets of the company. Was that bad? So bad a question? Technical? Nobody is wondering on what is the net assets of the company. 250, that's right. Can I say one way to look at the net assets is this? Another way of looking at the net assets is this. When you look at the net assets, you can take assets minus liability. So in Indus 103, we always took assets minus liability. Agreed. Now, what I'm about to say, I'll give you the logic later. You will get the logic very soon. Don't worry. But let me make a statement. In Indus 103, when you took the net assets, you took assets minus liability. But in Indus 110, we'll prefer to consider equity share capital plus other equity. Now, don't ask me the why at this stage. But I'm just putting it across that we will prefer that as far as equity, that is net asset is concerned, it's the sum total of equity share capital plus other equity. This will be a preferred approach. Great. Now, if you look at the investment, it is 300. Would you like to apply Indus 103 and tell me what is the goodwill? You compare the purchase consideration, investment in the balance sheet, no NCI, and you compare it with the net assets on the date of acquisition, that is 250. What is the amount of goodwill? That's right. The goodwill is 50. So what I'm doing, I'm putting this goodwill as a separate line item in the balance sheet. Wow. Now, please watch this carefully. A consolidated balance sheet is nothing but you add the two balance sheets. You know, if somebody were to tell me in a layman term, what is a consolidated balance sheet? I will say you just add the two balance sheets. That's called a consolidated balance sheet. You heard me correct. So now let me ask you a mathematical question. When you took this goodwill of 50, is it the difference between these three figures? Yes. So do you think these three figures will now appear in the balance sheet on a mathematical level? You've taken a net impact of these three figures and the goodwill is appearing as a separate line item. So can I say, will these three informations appear in the balance sheet now? And that's right, no. So now what I'm going to do, I will just aggregate asset to asset and liability to liability. My consolidation is done. Let's do it. Let's add the non-current assets. 200 plus 500, that makes it 700. Investments will not appear because that's gone in the goodwill calculation. That's gone. Now let's consider current assets. 100 plus 200, that makes it 300. The asset side is done. Added the assets to assets. Liabilities, this will not appear in the balance sheet. So we take care of equity share capital. That is 700. We take care of, equity share capital is 200. And the other equity is 700. We're just copying things as it is, aggregating them. And the current liabilities is 100 plus 150. That makes it 150. C, is the balance sheet tallied or not? 1050, 1050. This is called consolidation. Did you understand my case one? Did you understand the case one?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So I think the moral of the story which we have got in this particular case is simple and straight. When you're consolidating, you get the goodwill. Now, let me show you something which will conceptually, give you more power to understand. Let me, I think, conceptually elaborate something further. Compare this balance sheet, that is consolidation, versus the standalone financials of the parent. Compare these two balance sheets for a better picture. The goodwill is not in that balance sheet. The non-current assets is appearing at 200 extra. The current assets is appearing at 100 extra. I'm doing a one-to-one comparison of the parent balance sheet and the consolidation. The goodwill is not there. The non-current and the current assets is appearing at 200 extra. Equity share capital of the equity is same and the current liability is appearing at 50 extra. Now, I'm going to make a statement, please vouch me. So you can take the sum total of the assets is 300 minus 50, that makes it 250. Is the investment replaced by? Is this investment 300 replaced by net assets that is 250 plus a goodwill that is 50? Is my thought correct? Was this, and watch me carefully, have you replaced the investment? The investment is gone, and what has come in its place is goodwill and the net assets. So your investment stands replaced by goodwill and the net assets. Got the point? Great. Okay, this is case one. Now I'm going to go to the case number two. Slight little change in the case number one. Slight little change in the case number one to give you the case number two. So I'm taking the same balance sheet. Which I gave you earlier, and I'm making the consolidation on December X1. Highlights is now the holding is got in the subsidiary 80% stake, which means there is a 20% NCI. The only change which I'm making is I'm introducing that you've got an 80% stake, so there is a 20% NCI, but I am taking the consolidated balance sheet on date of acquisition. Now, please watch this carefully. As I do the calculations in terms of goodwill. So when I calculate the goodwill, I'm applying the concepts which I learned in Ind AS 103. I'll take the purchase consideration and I'll add the NCI and I'll compare it with the net assets to get the value of goodwill. This is how the goodwill will be taken. But let me do a slight little change. At this stage. Since you acquired 80%, I'm going to take this as 240. Since I'm considering that I acquired 80% shares, so instead of 300, I'm going to take this as 80%, 240. So to match my balance sheet, I'm going to take this as 260. Rest the same. Now, please help me in the calculations of the goodwill. What is the PC? What is my purchase consideration? It is 240.
240.
And what is the net assets? It is 250. If I take the NCI at Pasna, can you tell me what will be my NCI Pasna?
20% of net asset. 50.
That's very good. So we can say 20% is the NCI. So I take 20% of the NCI net assets, that is 250. It comes to 50. Let's see what is the goodwill. So can I say goodwill is coming to 40? So this is what we are going to do in terms of the goodwill calculation. So what we've done, we've applied Ind AS 103 in terms of calculating the goodwill. Let's show the goodwill, that is 40. By the way, for your understanding, is this full goodwill or is this a partial goodwill?
Partial.
Wonderful indeed. This is supposed to be a partial goodwill, and we're not looking at the implications at this stage. Now, let me ask you something. So in this particular case, is this equity and other equity completely gone in the goodwill calculation or only 80%?
Completely, sir.
Indirectly, let me just go back and explain indirectly. Can I compare this 240 versus the share in the net assets and get the same goodwill, right? I can take the PC 80%, compare it with the share in the net assets 80%. So is the goodwill considered entire 250 or just 80% of 250?
80%.
Wonderful indeed. So now the question is, if you've taken 80% of this in goodwill, will the 20% appear in the balance sheet? Yes or no?
No.
You've compared 240 versus 80% of this and got the goodwill. The 20% was not taken in goodwill. So should that 20% still appear in the balance sheet or not? You're aggregating balance sheets. Mathematics.
No.
It will appear.
Yes, it will appear.
See, you've taken in the goodwill calculations 240 and you've taken only 80% of 240. So the goodwill is considered only 80% of this. The remaining 20% did not go in the goodwill. So that 20% will appear in the balance sheet, and that would appear in the balance sheet as NCI. I hope you got the connect. I hope you got the connect on this. Let me put it again now. In my case number one, did you consider 100% investment and 100% net assets in goodwill?
Yes, sir.
Very good. And therefore, neither equity share capital nor other equity nor investment appeared in the balance sheet. Now let's make a second statement. Now, when you made a consolidated balance sheet, did you consider 100% of the investments in goodwill? Yes. But did you take 100% net assets or only 80%?
100%.
In the second case,
80%.
80%. So 20% is appearing as NCI. And that's the reason that you've got a goodwill, which is taken 80% net assets, and there is NCI, there is 20%. Rest, everything is same.
So, but net asset is appearing 100%, na? In
No,
second
you see,
case.
no. Okay, I got your point. You mean to say that after the consolidation, all the assets and liability will be aggregated full, correct?
Yes, sir.
So what is happening? You aggregate 100% net assets and you show 20% NCI. So in effect, the consolidation is 100 or 80. You got
100.
my point?
Yes, sir.
Because you've aggregated 100% of the assets liability, but at the same time shown 20% NCI. So indirectly consolidation is only 80.
Yes, sir.
Since you've got a control, you reflect the full net assets in your balance sheet, but you can't reflect the 20% also. So when you aggregate the entire assets liability, you're showing 20% payable to outsider. That is the non-controlling interest. So consolidation follows the concept of full consolidation, but at the same time, what does not belong to you appears as an NCI. So when you consolidate full and the NCI 20, the net consolidation is 80%. Right. So now we are in a position to simply aggregate the inputs. So let's add the non-current assets. Let's add the current assets line to line. So non-current will be 500 plus 200, that's 700. The current assets will now be 240 plus 100, that is 340. The equity share capital will be only for the parent 200 and 700. The equity share capital is 200 and it is 700. Other equity. And we consider the current liabilities, and that is 100 plus 50, that's 150. Now let's see, is the balance sheet tallied on this case or not? So current assets, I think we've taken is 240, 100.
360.
Sorry, current assets is
360.
360, sorry. Yes, this is 360. So see, is the balance sheet tallied on this? 1100,
Yes.
I think 1100, perfectly tallied. Did you start getting a logic of how the consolidation is occurring? Are you able to connect the dots on the consolidation technique?
Yes, sir.
I'm now going to make a few statements. I'm not done. I have more cases to follow, but I have just concentrated on two situations right now. Number one, I saw the concept of consolidation on the date of acquisition. The common thing in case one and case two is I'm doing the consolidation on acquisition date. Case one, no NCI. Case two, NCI. So let's concentrate if there is an NCI. Now, let's show you something more. Let's show you something more at this stage. If you compare this balance sheet with the standalone balance sheets of the parent, this goodwill is appearing. This is including the 200, and this is including, I guess, to the extent of 100. This is same, so this was not there in the balance sheet, and this is including, I guess, 50. Now watch this carefully. So what we have done, we have replaced the investment. We have replaced the investment. What was the figure of investment? I guess 240. Can I say this is replaced by net assets is 250? It is replaced by net assets 250 plus the goodwill, that is 40, minus the NCI, that is 50. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So if you notice that this will match, so the net assets is 250, the goodwill is 40, and this is 50, that makes it a total of 240. Indirectly, we can say you took net assets minus the NCI, so you took the share in net assets plus the goodwill. So investment in a consolidated balance sheet. Investment in a consolidated balance sheet appears equal to share in net assets plus goodwill at any point of time. Remember this because I'm going to use this information in Index 28 as well. That when you replace the investment in the standalone financials, you replace it by the share in the net assets plus the goodwill. So I've done two cases with you, but my consolidation procedure is not yet over. I've done the consolidation on acquisition date with without NCI. Next class, what I'm going to do, I'll add to this element. I'll do the consolidation year later. I'll look into the fact that if you consolidate year later, then how does the consolidation take place? Based on all the four cases, consolidation acquisition date with without NCI, consolidation later with without NCI, I am going to develop a 7-step model. And then based on the 7-step model, we'll start working on different kind of adjustments which you can confront in consolidation. So once the 7 steps are merged with the adjustments put together, I am sorted in terms of doing consolidated balance sheet. Then we'll come to the consolidated income statement thereafter. So next class is going to be very crucial. And I'm happy that class is happening on the 1st of January. What a good day to start off things with new set of learnings in life. So in any way, first of all, let me wish you in advance a very happy new year to you and your family. And I'll of course see you on 1st January on the very first day of the next year as well. Thank you very much.
Sir, in goodwill is full goodwill still share in net asset plus goodwill in
Sorry,
replacement.
I didn't get you.
So this goodwill is 40 is partial goodwill.
Correct.
If say goodwill is at fair value, so full goodwill.
No, if this is partial, then this is not full goodwill. Right now, the
Sir,
goodwill is
if
partial.
taken as a goodwill calculation at fair value, so replacement investment is share in net asset plus full goodwill.
Yes, yes. In any case, if you say that investment will appear at share in net asset plus partial or full goodwill as the case may be, correct.
Okay.
So you can say it'll always be equal to share in net assets plus goodwill, which can be full, which can be partial. But this will always match.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for some wonderful teaching. Thank you very much indeed, friends. So I think it's time now to say goodbye to you. So please do revise all this. I'm going to see you on 1st of January. Till then, take care. Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you, sir. So check the files, please. I sent you the files.
I've already downloaded
Yeah,
that.
thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
Wonderful
much
teaching, sir.
indeed.
Wonderful teaching. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Happy New Year, sir. Bye.
Same to you, Beta. Thank you.
Yeah.
Haji, thank you.